full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello and welcome to tonight's edition of Education Tonight. I hope everyone's well. Probably first full week back at school, Brent.
Sorry, I've just got a bit of feedback in my loop. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear myself. Maybe we can just try and sort that out. There's a bit of a loop there.
Hear me all right?
Just pause for a second. Do you want to just come out? Do you want to come out of the studio a minute, Brent, and see if you can come back in?
Yeah.
And I'll kind of crack on with the start. Oh, just me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Education Tonight. Sorry about that little bit of feedback. Really pleased tonight to say that we're joined by maths teacher Dr. Tom Bennison, who's going to be talking us through the future of maths. So, if you remember the last days of the Conservative government, there's a big push on mathematics, to be fair, and there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes. And there's been a new report out by the Royal Society called A New Approach to Mathematical and Data Education. And we'll be exploring kind of all things maths with Dr. Tom Bennison in a moment. We'll also, second story tonight, we'll also be looking at what the Child Laureate said about should, and this is a bit of an open question, should children actually have a bit more flexibility to learn from home? Maybe school is not for everybody. Maybe learning from home should be an option that's on the cards for a lot of students. So we'll also be discussing that. So just while I wait for Brent to come on, I'll just say hello to our sponsors for tonight's show. So we're really pleased to be sponsored by Futurum Careers, which provide a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. They help teachers to show their students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all resources align with the Gatsby benchmarks and are free to download. So you can visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. And we're also pleased to say that we are sponsored by John Catt. John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 25% off your order. And Brent's back in the room. Okay, brilliant. Any feedback, Brent? Are we good to go?
I think I'm good to go. Yeah, no, that's the whole reboot thing, isn't it? Okay, cool. How many times does that happen in the class when you're technologist and you go restart and then you have to get the kids sort of? It's a really tough one, isn't it? When you have to think on the spot like that when the technology.
Yeah, it is a
challenge. Kind of old school improv, isn't it?
Yeah, it does really throw some kind of stuff off, but I think kind of the students sometimes are much better at kind of quickly rewiring the projector and kind of getting you kind of back up and going. And sometimes they quite like kind of being involved. So without further ado, then should we get Tom in the studio so we can kind of break down what's going on with maths? So good evening, Tom. Are you okay? I think if you can just unmute yourself, Tom, that'd be great.
Yeah, see, technology, bad.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you.
Good.
So
this is why we should have the abacus, isn't it?
Yeah, but you were like trusty and reliable.
Yeah. So there's a new report out called The New Approach to Mathematical and Data Education. Do you want to just take us through kind of why the report was kind of set up, kind of, and what its kind of what were the kind of abstract kind of points from it?
Okay, so yeah, I think for those of us kind of in the maths game, this is one of many reports. So the current president of the Royal Society, Adrian Smith, I think this is his third report on changes he proposes to maths education. So he last did one 2017, and then there was one in 2004 as well. I think we all kind of agree that it's not weird. Nothing that much has changed. We're still in basically the same space we were 20 years ago. But actually the world is moving on. The needs of students, the needs of employers, and in terms of actual maths, the maths that is becoming more relevant, that's also changing.
Yeah.
And are we setting up our students, really like a whole generation, are they being set up to be competitive internationally?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, one of the things we discussed this on the show actually, that when we were doing the manifesto things, obviously it seemed genuinely that Rishi Sunak was an advocate for this, wasn't he? He was really keen on maths.
Yeah.
He was kind of pushing it forward. Was this report did it predate that? Is it or is it kind of given the push, that last push towards the end?
I'd argue the actual work on it started before.
Okay.
It's kind of pretty much very apolitical, really. It's just from the start. But I think there's broad support across the political spectrum for the fact that there is needing to be some reform in mathematics. And how that looks is perhaps up for debate. Obviously, the media just goes on the maths to 18, and then everyone panics that you're going to be forced to do A-level maths, which I don't think was ever really the intention.
Yeah.
But it is true that we are different to almost all developed countries in that our students don't study a maths component or don't have to up until 18.
Yeah, so it talks about these kind of, I guess, what we call kind of functional skills that we want the whole generation to have. So can you just for kind of a layman teacher who's not kind of in the maths bubble, what sort of kind of skills does that kind of mean? What is it wanting to kind of get students to have?
So like critical analysis of arguments. So it's not just the typical GCSE maths, it's that critical analysis, that data education, being able to interpret data, that's becoming a lot more important in many careers.
So that's me as a geographer. That's where my entry to maths was at A level, which was that GIS, the standard deviation, the CHI, testing data sets, reliability of data, construction of data. It's quite, statistical analysis.
Yeah. And actually, for geography, maths and geography is quite advanced compared to what some of our A-level students do. Like some of those topics are only in the further maths A-level. And I think people don't really talk about that as that's quite significant, I think.
Yeah.
It has diverged at GCSE because I teach both at, I'm actually a qualified geography teacher, but I taught history for 20 years. And the funny thing is I always was able to divide people and say, well, you could do both. But now in the last 7 or 8 years, there's a definite divide of if you're better at maths and science, you head towards geography. And if you're better at English or RE, you head towards history. And there's definitely the two have split. I'm looking at one of the geography papers is, it has. There's a whole geography paper, which is basically interpretation of data, field work, without doing field work, but you are doing transects, you are using statistics and even questioning the different types of statistics and the best charts to demonstrate the different data sets as well. So that's definitely one of the things that's different about, say, for instance, GCSE geography, which now needs maths that wasn't even ironically taught at GCSE, because it's weird, the geography's teaching certain maths at GCSE that maths isn't doing at GCSE was doing later on, if that makes sense. They're slightly disconnected.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem, actually, in that the public don't see the connections between all the subjects. I don't think that's just a maths thing. I think history and maths are quite connected in some regards in terms of like forming arguments and stuff like that. But we kind of silo them and then don't look at it in the round, maybe.
Yeah. And one of the things the report says is about this kind of general quantitative literacy. And I'll read from the report. It says, addressing the need for all students to confidently apply their mathematical and data skills to common real-world quantitative problems in a range of educational, employment, and everyday contexts. Is that kind of not happening now, or does it just need kind of developing?
So to some level at post 16, a lot of that is done now in the core maths qualification.
Yeah.
But actually upkeep is very low, really, for that. Around the uptake, we've got about 13,000 students, I think, now doing it across the country. Kind of, it's grown a bit. I suspect it will grow over the next few years because there's now a funding implication for sixth forms and colleges to offer it. So any student who does core maths brings in an extra 900 quid.
Yeah, because that was always the kind of historical argument. I remember it kind of when I was at school, you're never going to use this. So why kind of bother in a way at school? I guess is that kind of past the problem? Is it's kind of become kind of too abstract in some cases that it's not reaching kind of people can't see the kind of real life implications of the maths that they're learning.
Yeah, I know. I think that's exactly true. I think what's possibly happened is that there's lots of kind of basic numeracy now that's kind of bundled up with maths, and it's not really maths. And then there's equally very odd decisions at some of the GCSE curriculum with like what some of the foundation students need to do that there is arguably no point them being able to do. They don't need to remember the square or the sine of 30 degrees as a third. No reason for them to know that. And I think all of that just combines into turning people off the subject.
Yeah.
And not enough time in school is actually spent doing maths and like the enjoyment of maths, like things like the Königsberg Bridge problem, all the kind of things that actually students and young people are actually really interested in doing if you just let them play with it.
Yeah. So get it all a bit more into that kind of problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that isn't happening.
And you think with the likes of coding, because I mean, I was teaching some computers. Staff shortages, being as it is.
How is your timetable, Brent?
I'm just back to geography and PHSC and history. Thankfully, I'm reading. I'm doing a lesson of reading. Yeah. So 2 years ago it was physics. So physics. Thank God Newton still exists, and thank God gravity's still around. That's all I'm saying. But physics is pretty eternal, and of course, the maths in physics is quite functional as well. But what was interesting was obviously there's a strong connection with ICT, a strong connection with algorithms, a strong connection with a lot of the stuff the kids do, but yet there's none of that taught in maths. And you think there's a natural, future of we need kids to be coding, we need kids to be doing things like coding, and you basically the way you do coding is connected to maths, and certainly there's a get in there where you could change that curriculum to sort of help both. That could be a life skill for the future, and they haven't caught on to that. I don't know why they haven't got on to that.
No.
They're doing silo on that rather than connect the two. They are separate, and I don't think they should be separate.
No, I don't think they should be. They never used to be separate, and that's coming kind of top down as well. Like a lot of universities would have a computer science department and a maths department. 30 years ago, they were the same department for many of them, and they've kind of split off. And I think a lot of it is that people trying to kind of protect what they're interested in. And the same in schools, you can become quite protectionist sometimes, can't you?
Protect their little kingdom and sort of fiefdom wrong, But that is the thing, as you say. I mean, English and maths, the functionality of English and maths, you cannot get away from. That's why they're core skills. But equally, we had always got you must bring English and maths. We were sort of designated that where's the literacy, where's the numeracy. So we do try on other subjects to get it in, but it always feels like it's bolted on. And I also think that primary school just does it so much better. Primary school, one teacher teaches a lot. The kids they see a lot more of why they do it. Whereas things, and I think every curriculum's got like that. And it shocks me to know that maths is like that, because I've always had the impression, well, maths is essential. Even if you like it, you don't have it. Come on, it's like breathing. It's maths is breathing, and water is English. Without the two, you can't survive. You need water and air, and I think water is English and maths is air. And I never understood why kids weren't interested in it. It was really a revelation to think, well, have they really dulled it down and done such a bad job that even the most essential of essential subjects has switched people off, when even it is probably the most essential thing you're able to do is to both count and reiterate, really.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? If you're looking at like the amount of people doing WeSit GCSE qualifications in colleges and the passing percentages are getting that for that the government's saying that they need, it just feels cruel to an extent. Like they're being told they have to do it. They've done it in the summer, they then do it November, the summer, November, the summer. That's potentially 4 more times.
Yeah.
Still end up with a 2.
Yeah. Well, I've
being, I don't know, a fantastic plumber.
Yeah.
But they're still being told they have to do this one particular qualification, as opposed to there needs to be something else that can teach you those kind of the key, I think, the quantitative skills. Like the being able to critique data in the media and things like that. But they don't necessarily need to be able to do a bit of trigonometry on a piece of paper, in my mind.
Yeah, we just had a comment there saying about the kind of absurdity. Thanks, JBL, I think it was, for his comment. Just while we're kind of looking at that kind of picture from GCC, you very kindly kind of put some kind of data slides together for us. So if Hannah, you could put up the first one that looks.
Oh, hold on a second. We get a Mads guest on. The first thing he does is gives us a data set, like
obviously, yeah. And also, this is a point to say to our other guests. You know, come on, send us your slides. Before
good preparation. I like.
There's not many there.
Okay, so let's we've got
all available on offer.
But you know, actually, I'll make a point. You know, it's interesting that during COVID, what was very interesting was that the average member of the general public couldn't understand the graphs, the data. It was interesting to see when you had those daily briefings and stuff, and you had the COVID rate, and you had this, that, the other, and I was often thinking, I can understand that. I wonder how many other people could actually understand, or were they bamboozled by it? And it was interesting watching Boris trying to explain graphs and everything else, and Whitty sometimes had to take over, and you think, rescue him, quickly get in there and rescue. He's got no idea what he's talking about. Yeah. And it is. I
don't know what Tom thought of that, but I thought that was a kind of a classic example of kind of what not to do. Like every day show a different type of graph. So once you kind of getting your head around one type of data,
it's a different picture shown.
Yeah, different way of showing it. Right, should we have a look at this one? So this is the A-level maths.
This is A-level maths, and it's just, I mean, it's a picture echoed, I think, across every subject, probably, really.
Yeah.
But just that massive national discrepancy between down in the south near London, and if the government's saying that like maths is vital to everyone and everyone's got a strong entitlement to it up to the age 18, we can't just forget half the country, can we? Say,
but how much of this, like, I mean, Brent, we could get a kind of Venn diagram buzz right here, couldn't we? This is down to kind of staffing, this is down to kind of poverty, this is down to
I mean, the social science for me, the geographer in me would cross-reference that with educational sort of funding. I'd look at deprivation, I'd look at the percentage of children on free school meals, poverty index. I mean, all of those social statistics would completely confirm that be a positive correlation between those social statistics of deprivation, lack of funding, but also the harder one is to measure is the cultural capital, isn't it? But they're your red wall, they're your deindustrialized areas, they're the areas left behind, and literally we all know that. And if I was then to layer social mobility index on top of that, there'd be a strong correlation between the lack of social mobility in those areas. I mean, it isn't rocket science, but they all are connected. The social statistics, the educational outcomes are so connected.
Yes, of course they are. Yeah, they really are. I think it's something we shouldn't lose sight of. I was in a kind of online seminar. There was a guy he taught in New York, and he was saying how, like, he was teaching those students there that are so poor that they do get their free meals and stuff like that. It's not as common over in the States as there. But that actually, they all love engaging with maths, but it needs to be made relevant and then wanting to actually engage. So not just doing what we tell them we think they should do, giving them some actual problem solving stuff. And that kind of
practicality, isn't it? It's to see it. Yeah, it's to make it tangible, isn't it? It's to make it relevant, tangible, but also sell it, isn't it? And that's again, you sort of think you shouldn't have to sell maths. You should have to sell it because it should be pretty self-explanatory. If you haven't got decent mathematical skills, you are going to struggle in life, even in your own personal finance. And it's one of the things that, as a former PHSE coordinator, used to upset me when all those payday loans people used to always target a certain demographic because they had no concept of what compound interest was or 1,000% APR. And you're like, what? You borrow a $5, do you know what that's going to be in a month's time? Do you have any idea? Because they didn't. And that's the thing, or mortgages. And I think that's another trick that's been missed, is that level of real life situational maths that I think a lot of children don't have the awareness of. No.
And unless it is like a PSHE, you don't get that in the current maths classroom until you choose to do mathematical studies or core maths, as most people call it, and where they do things about APR, payday loan, mortgages, tax, national insurance. And without fail, all of the students are like, well, why have we not done this earlier on in our school career? Because this would actually be stuff that we think is really useful. Like, I want to understand my tax.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, if you look at kind of what happened in the summer with the riots, you know, it's not just about kind of understanding data in terms of the news and everything that. It's about kind of understanding your own life and your own context. And it kind of, you know, you are scared if you don't kind of understand these kind of key things. So it kind of adds to kind of social anxiety, doesn't it? You know, which you could argue. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it could be a contributing factor to then people then feeling angry, feeling dissatisfied, feeling disconnected. So they are then kind of like reaching out to kind of, you know, random bits of information that are making them feel a little bit better in life.
You're more easily to succumb to misrepresentation. You can't fight against it because haven't had those skills taught to you. Yeah.
So there's a real social need for this, isn't there? We just put up one there that says A-level maths uptake in 2024. And again,
math is now the most popular A-level. For the first time this year, over 100,000 students did A-level maths.
Do you think that is employability? Do you think that is people going into maths because parents are sort of saying, because you always had that argument, haven't you, where the STEM subjects were, I'd like to do art, I'd like to do music, but you always have that push from parents to go, we want you to do maths. You know, it's that kind of, you're going to waste your time. And with the value of degree, I got to justify the financial outtake. You know, doing an arts degree from a working class background, you're going to say to your parents, what are we going to get out of that? It's that tangible thing of do maths, get a good job. Do maths, go work in the city. Do maths. There is an employable occupation out of it.
Definitely.
So you've got people doing it.
I think that
intrinsically wanting,
especially the last one about them also going to be getting rid of degrees that don't generate high income jobs.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. It's those kind of key messages, isn't it, that gets picked up in the media, as opposed to like the worth of other subjects. And
because ideally what you want intrinsic motivation, don't you? You want people to want to do maths, not pushed to do it, isn't it? Because you can still, I've had students argue me before and say they can do it, but they won't be happy doing it, and therefore it's not something they take to. And I think that feeds into some of our mental health issues where kids are trapped, aren't they? Or they've got the lack of choice, or they're forced to, or they feel they have to, and that puts them under intense pressure with something that they may not naturally be gifted at, but something they have to be good at. Yeah, and there's a difference between not, you know, wanting to do it and not wanting to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Or something they are naturally good at, possibly, but they're not passionate about, and then they're constantly made to feel that they should be because they're good at it. So they start doing it, and that just, I don't think that's good mental health wise at all, to be honest.
Yeah, Tom, can I just ask you about this kind of uptake in maths at A level? Are we seeing a success there from these kind of UTC STEM based schools? Is that helping drive this? Is there any kind of evidence?
I think it's a success of those policies that successive governments of all kinds have kind of pushed towards. So there's the UTCs, think the things like Newast and not if you're local to Nottingham,
Yeah.
all those kind of specialist schools, and then also the funding policies that mean that they are actually pushed by the colleges and pushed by sixth forms. For a long time, there's been a math premium. So if you get over a certain baseline, your baseline gets calculated every few years, and if you're over that, you get an extra 900 quid per student.
Okay.
And then there's now, as of this year, this core maths premium, which is £900 for any student taking core maths, which would normally be like an additional 4th AS level.
Yeah.
Ooh, can I say something controversial then?
Yeah, go for it.
Do we think then that some colleges, being businesses, and they have a carrot of a financial carrot, do you think they've lowered the sort of benchmark to take on more students to financially benefit themselves?
Quite probably.
Who maybe aren't capable of doing maths or kind of would normally meet the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, that I think I've not seen any data on
because
that.
It is a business now. Colleges, we are in education, which is
yeah, that especially with the core.
That's my theory. That's why I said it could be controversial because
that's not what education should be about, is it? But in practice, you've got to make money.
Well, it's not. But no, it should be about creating an all-rounded individual. I mean, that's the irony of what Rishi Sunak said, and I do think he was genuine because I think he was unapologetic that his own background maths helped change him, helped sculpt him. He was a banker. There was a sense of kind of pet project in the same way that Michael Gove was pet project about wanting everybody to learn Latin for some strange unknown reason. And if I was education, I'd be
beneficial.
Yeah, if I was education,
how's that going?
Well, there would be the Peak District. I mean, I'd have every kid doing outdoor education. I mean, they'd be all out, doing some sort of different education policy, more outward bound. But that's the thing. I suppose that's his genuine thing was he wanted more to do maths because he felt that it could create an all-rounded individual. It could be good for national efficiency. Could be good for the country. And I did see his point. I thought he had a valid point. Except he missed the point of the fact that we just don't have enough maths teachers to do that.
Yeah,
he doesn't. Well, I think now the number of maths teachers.
We currently don't have enough maths teachers, but we also don't have the qualification mix that's suitable.
Yeah,
for students. I mean, I love maths and I love maths A level, but it's certainly not right for a huge amount of the population to make them just do more of the same like GCSE stuff. It needs to be more in context. And I guess that was where I was trying to go with the T levels, is that there'd be a minimum maths requirement in them, but that it would be in what they need it for, as opposed to an arbitrary maths qualification.
But we've had this conversation before, Tom. Wasn't that always the case for A levels? I always thought there had to be a kind of certain percentage within all A levels before they got their kind of funding.
Not within all, but lots had to have a certain amount. So geography's 10%, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, business was as well. Yeah,
business 10%.
Yeah,
a minimum. In fact, it's got higher than that when you look at some of the maths coming in. So there's a minimum requirement, but they tend to go a bit higher than that.
Yeah. Okay, should we just have a quick look at what's going on at GCSE then? Because that's kind of that's kind of that headline thing that's kind of forcing people to have this conversation all the time.
The whole thing.
I've got to go back. I've got to do my GCSE. I've got to find I've seen it over the last couple of weeks. I've got to find a college. I've got to find somewhere that's going to have me, so I can do my English and maths and maybe add something else to it to kind of get in the door and stuff. So we've got a slide that's called just GCSE outcomes across the country. It's the next one. Sorry, about GCSE outcomes. That's it. And so what we're looking at here, because
on the left hand side is the GCSE outcomes for students aged 16 for maths.
Yeah. Okay.
And then on the right hand side, it's those students who are the resit students, the 17 to 19s. There's only one county, I think, where they all get 4 and above. And actually, that's Rutland, and they had 15. It is Rutland. I think if you click into it, I'm pretty sure they had 15 students did their GCSE resit maths. Whereas
Rutland's a lake anyway.
There's a school in the middle of the lake.
There's a little school in the middle of the lake with 15 kids, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry if any of our viewers are from Rutland, but you know, it's a geographical fact.
It does sound like they've been held captive to do their maths.
Yes, make them get their 100.
You won't talk to anybody.
But it's just, I think it's a stark picture. I think of actually, this is possibly one of the worst policies that's ever been implemented. Really, the maths reset policy.
Yeah,
because it's never worked. Year on year, it doesn't work. So 16% of them get that 4.
Yeah.
And what damage are we actually doing to them as people and students by making them do?
Well, it generates quite a bit of money for certain individuals, unfortunately, because it's a bit of an industry again, isn't it? Not to put. I'm very cynical tonight. I'm sorry. I'm getting, you know, but it's true, isn't it? Because how much the resets cost, and the resets cost, and the resets cost, and the resets cost. So it is a whole. So there is a financial implication, which again, many were saying is disadvantaging, you know, working class kids who are more likely to not do well. So there's a trap there, isn't there? That you're more likely not to do well if you're from those areas, and yet you are financially penalized for people who don't have the financial capability to actually go and then they can't, you know, if you're from a more affluent background, you could pay for a tutor.
I mean, there's that private tutor market is massive now.
Yeah.
Especially for maths, it's huge.
Yeah. Because the pressure on, you know, and again, and I suppose that there's a cyclical thing. More people now doing maths know that you have to get 7s or 8s, don't you, really, to theoretically get into some colleges to do maths. They do want higher grades. So then you have that whole cyclical thing of the pressure put on. But I often think as well, if they're all trying to put pressure on there to get that subject, what impact does it have on the other GCSEs as well? Because kids only have a finite amount of time to study. And if they're focusing on 1 or 2 and they're really pressuring, and that's where I think we don't have that conversation sometimes where there's winners and losers at GCSEs. And I see that some subjects get dropped down. And in fact, ironically, some subjects that kids really enjoy, like their art subjects, which are a bit more labor intensive, get real dropped off the radar because you're doing extra tuition to get over that line. And it's not balanced, is it?
That isn't balanced. It's hard to argue that is leading to well-rounded.
No. I just want to deal with the question that's come up on the screen here, Tom. I don't know if you can see it, but
I can see it,
yeah. So kind of what ultimately kind of what happens to at the end if they still haven't got to...
After 11 years, still can't get a 4 or 5. I mean, obviously, there's the mathematics that the curve is rigged, really, isn't it? So there's always the same proportions getting these grades. So unless you move
so statistically, just to understand this, so I would guess, and I'm just guessing here, that most students that aren't hitting the required grade are majority going to be from the foundation paper. Is that generally right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then when they retake again, they're kind of proportionally disadvantaged again, kind of statistically, to try and pass again, aren't they?
Yeah, because they're still doing the foundation paper.
So
still they're probably having less time than they ever had in school.
Yeah.
In terms of lessons of maths, though that is changing. Because again, the funding rules are changing this year. So this year it's a recommendation, but next year, if you're resitting, you have to have 3 hours of English if you're doing an English resit, and 4 hours of maths if you're doing a maths resit. Whereas now, lots of places will give you just an hour to tick a box.
But presumably, there's a psychological thing going on as here. As they've struggled. They haven't done very well. They're now kind of back in the pot, as it were. And that's quite hard, isn't it, to kind of turn that again, isn't it? Certainly by November for some students who want to basically kind of get it done essentially.
Yeah, get it done within a couple of weeks, really.
They can concentrate on kind of other things. Because I get the impression that a lot of students just feel like they've been trapped by this, and they can't really get onto a good. In some cases, a level 3 qualification without kind of sorting this out. And ironically, they kind of disadvantaged again because they're doing their level 3 qualification and trying to resit at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who's managed to get through the first time,
they don't have that extra pressure, do they?
Yeah. They can just go on to a kind of a BTEC level 3, for example, and just kind of crack on with that. If they can, so
And I think it's got to be successful. The teachers have got to do it differently. And there's some all around, like, so Julia Smith is one, M Bell, they're absolutely fantastic in that reset space because they do things differently.
Okay.
A lot of it is building confidence of students.
Yeah.
And there's various things happening nationally in terms of trying to push that kind of approach out further through like the maths hubs. Uni of Nottingham have got a research EEF program about foundation and reset maths, and it's different ways. So that's all more realistic maths education as opposed to teaching it like they would have been taught at school.
Yeah, because there is a fear of maths. Yeah,
there's a fear.
There is,
and I think by the time you've been,
I still have that fear. The children. You know, it's tough. It is. I mean, there's parts of mathematics. I'll admit, I struggle with algebra, but yet you give me those graphs and statistics, and I can make them sing. It's just, it's such a difficult discipline, man. And it is a tough one, and it is a lot of fear in it. But I think that's the problem. Is that psychologically speaking, some of the children are put off, aren't they? They're overloaded. The curriculum. And then that fear perpetuates itself. And I don't think that the current exam system gets the best out of them. It's not measuring their maths ability. It's measuring their maths exam ability, which is different to their actual maths or their thinking ability or the thinking skills ability or the critical thinking skills ability. So it's just not fit for purpose, really.
No, are our exams actually measuring what we really should be measuring? That's the big question, really. Yeah. We're measuring what I guess is easy to measure to an extent. As opposed to the mathematical problem solving skills, those critical reasoning skills, that's really at the heart of what maths is as an actual discipline.
Yeah. So the curriculum itself has actually gone away from its kind of core purpose. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, it's to develop the brain, isn't it? We want to develop the brain to be able to make pathways to do problems, solve problems, to
be able to learn
problems, to come up with solutions. Which in essence is what these kids need to do in the future, because they're going to be dealing with a world that's going to move fast. They're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to come up with problem solving, critical thinking. And that's what maths should be doing. It should be allowing that ability for them to problem solve, because there's no more generation that's going to be more vital that they're able to overcome and adapt, which is really in essence what maths does, isn't it? It gives you that ability to problem solve, overcome and adapt and find various methods to solve different problems. That's the beauty of it sometimes, isn't it? There's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean that's really what maths is as a discipline. And I'd argue that we've possibly lost that with what's being taught certainly in secondary schools.
Yeah, we do need to run to a commercial break in a minute, Tom. But I just want one question: where are we kind of internationally with this? What's going on in kind of, we look at kind of like productivity, we're kind of drifting away from some countries, and we obviously got issues with GDP, and part of that problem is we become kind of unproductive as a society, and this is part of what you're saying about critical skills has been part of that problem. What's going on in kind of like China, for example, with this? Are they kind of way ahead of us on this
in terms of things like PISA scores? Yeah, they are.
No, but in terms of this, what you're saying, in terms of getting students to critically problem solve within their kind of maths curriculum.
Yeah, I would say we are, and that's measured. To be fair, that's measured quite well by the PISA tests.
Okay.
That the OEC do. They're not like our regular exams. That is measuring much better problem solving, being able to adapt, like mathematical dispositions. And if you look at the Shanghai textbooks, the Japanese textbooks, there's a lot more problem solving. And the primary curriculum is going that way now.
Yeah, good.
The primary curriculum is done a lot kind of influenced by them. But there's lots of stuff that we're not doing that other countries are. Like Germany has had mathematical modelling, I think, since 2003 in the secondary curriculum, like actual proper modelling.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. My daughter's primary maths, she was enjoying it until when? And it nearly knocked the living stuffing out of her till sats. She was loving it and she was enjoying it. And then all of a sudden, when somebody turned the screws on, she completely lost her confidence. Yeah, lost her confidence completely. We had to rebuild her back up because it was pressured against all the other children, and she just panicked. She just couldn't do it. Yet in class, she even said to me, she says, "Oh, I love doing maths in class." As soon as somebody switched on that SATs, That was it. The fear, the psychology. We had months of trying to get her back to, and she's only recovering now. And I think
it's horrible, isn't it? I think that's happening, really.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we really appreciate your time tonight, Tom. That's been kind of really eye-opening. If you follow Tom's Twitter handle, he shares a lot of this kind of data stuff and talks about maths all the time, which is fantastic. Really appreciate your time. So have a good evening, Tom. All the best. Wish you well.
Thank you very much. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. See you later. Okay, we're just going to have a quick ad break where we can say hello to our sponsors who are sponsoring tonight's show.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Okay, we're back in the room. Thank you very much for our sponsors. So we are looking at our second story tonight, Brent, which is the Anne Fine article that dropped in the week about that children should be allowed to learn online instead of going to school. So she's the children's laureate. And this has come off the back, and we did a show on absenteeism and absent children. I think this show was titled in sort of the back end of July, early August. And I'll be honest with you, I was surprised really that she was promoting this and promoting the fact that we don't really kind of punish absenteeism. We kind of just let people drift a bit online, a bit like the COVID period. What were your initial thoughts?
I think she's trying to be pragmatic about it and trying to come up with a solution to the current problem. And it is this time of the year where you see quite a lot of fines. And it's the time of the year where the local press is hilarious. Child sent home because of silly haircut. Child sent home because of this. Child sent home because they've got the wrong shoes. Child sent home, you're like, oh, here we go again. And parents being fined because of holidays. And there is that social contract that seems to be weakened where, schools are doing the best job they can, talking about attendance. We're under pressure from the former Ofsted, and God knows what they'll be looking for when they come in. But that was one of the things they always looked for was attendance, which I felt was cruel, because how can a school be responsible for a child's attendance? And what are we meant to do? Should the parents' responsibility for the child's attendance, but it seems that we're responsible for everything now, aren't we? But that was always a big stick to beat some schools with, where they, that's where we had those stories where head teachers were told, wasn't it? The head teachers were told to go out, and I think one of the former ministers were saying, head teachers get in a car and drive around and pick your kids up type scenario. So I get what she's trying to say is that for some children, and this is true, especially neurodivergent children, I noticed that during COVID. In particular, one student of mine sticks out in mind that they were on the autistic spectrum, and they really thrived during COVID because they had the best of both worlds. They had lessons from me, they had mum in the background, and between the two of us, they were getting a good education, and they didn't have to run the gauntlet of going into schools and all the sort of the issues that you have with some of these neurodivergent in schools. You know, for some children, homeschooling works, but there is, I think, some individuals now copping out, and there is trying to get out those who are genuinely need their children to be homeschooled and those who are conveniently homeschooling their children because A, they don't believe in education any longer, B, they're basically sucking on the Kool-Aid when it comes to all the conspiracy theories and think we're all wokey lefties who are indoctrinating children into this, that, the on. I had a conversation at the weekend with an individual who's saying, what are they teaching history at schools? I'm like, hi, I'm a history teacher. We're not teaching any of that there. Just stop reading these newspaper articles. The bulk of us put all our schemes of work online. You can go to any school and ask them to see what your child's been taught. Please don't buy into all that. And they're like, so telling me they knew better than me. And I'm pretty much telling them, sorry, you think you're buying into all that media hype. That's the problem is that we're losing a lot of children to so many different ways. School toxicity, overcrowding, school facilities aren't brilliant. There's so many different reasons why children aren't going to school. Some undiagnosed needs. It's very hard to put your finger on individually. For some, it's different for other reasons. But there is a pattern developing. And I think what she's trying to say is let's try and find a compromise or a way to try and educate children in a more relaxed way that suits some children. However, it does open Pandora's box. And my one big argument against this is quite simply safeguarding. If we are telling us that children during COVID were suffering as a result of not being in school, this contradicts it, doesn't it? Because school isn't just about, education. It's about allowing adults to supervise children, find out what's going on in the child's life. You think of all the stuff that we do now. We find out about life around the child. We have a duty of care for the mental, physical well-being of the children. Children could come and speak to an adult about the issues at home, and sometimes they're speaking to us, the teachers, about issues that they can't speak to their parents. You take the example, for instance, of that young man who was sentenced recently, and his parent was in Ibiza. Some children come to school to escape some of their life, and school is a place where they feel safe, welcomed, and looked after.
That's right.
It's and we can help, but I think for others, it's a case-by-case basis. It has to be on a case-by-case basis. But I think it's dangerous to open the door and say, okay, I want the best of both worlds, because are the resources there? Who checks the quality of lessons? There's no standardization of checking the quality of lessons. What's to say that some parents, instead of their child getting suspended or expelled from school, say, we'll homeschool them. And then the child sits at home and plays on their Xbox for a couple of months. Who's checking?
Yeah, so what do you think would have to happen then if this was, let's say, if this was to become kind of policy that we were going to allow this flexibility? I mean, there's a couple of things, and there's one kind of what you're saying. How do you ensure kind of safeguarding? How do you ensure the kind of quality of education? But also, presumably, this, like COVID, one of the reasons why the home learning was so successful with COVID, a lot of teachers really stepped up and kind of moved their whole pedagogy stuff straight onto kind of online kind of education. So have we got enough teachers, I guess, to support in school and out school learning, if that one child is attached to the original school, not homeschooled? So they're essentially
hybrid model.
Hybrid model. Yeah.
Hybrid model.
How would that work then? Would you have to kind of almost enroll as that? Would you have to apply as that and kind of check?
I think you could do almost a couple of days in school, a couple of days not in school kind of scenario. I still think you'd need to have coming into school. I don't think you'd have to have, the child would have to have a bit like your T-level scenario, wouldn't it? Where they do a couple of days in their employer, a couple of days educated.
Yeah.
So you could do that situation where there is still quality assurance and you can still check their progress, and you still build a relationship with them, and they still come into the physical school building. And that, I think, could be a way forward, and that might help some children. I think some schools are actually kind of doing that, aren't they? Especially when some students come closer to the the GCSEs and A levels ends, and if they're struggling with school, they have extended study leave and stuff, and you still have to provide an education. And I've done that for some children, where you provide an education for children and you send the lesson resources home and you check on the lesson resources. So I think you'd have to have an outreach team, wouldn't you? A set of teachers possibly who go and do home visits. And And I know that used to happen. I had a friend of mine who broke his leg when he was young, and he had a teacher go round, didn't he? And we used to have that, didn't we? Teachers going around the community educating children who are not well, or educating children who are who illness. And I think that I'm not too sure where that system went, but there was teachers going around the communities when I was growing up. And that was a thing where there was like a homeschooling teacher who specialized in going and visiting children in their homes and educating them at home because they weren't, I'm talking children who are quite ill. So that could be a scenario. But you're right, we don't have enough teachers in the classroom, never mind to have surplus teachers going around the community. But for me, it's a standardization thing of what are the children being taught. And I worry about what I saw, it gives me nightmares, is some of the far right organizations were encouraging people to remove their children from mainstream education and then offering to educate them using their resources, which are, I'll be honest with you, nothing short of 1933 Germany. And that what worries me is that where are these children going, who is educating them? And that people are just bypassing the system now. They're just taking the children out of school at the first sign of they don't get what they want. And what happens to those children now, we don't know. And I think there are just too many children falling through the cracks, which I think is well-intentioned, what she's saying. But unfortunately, I think it's not exactly what we need. We need more children back in school, not encouraging more not to be back in school. I think that's a bit of an own goal is what you're suggesting. I think that's true. But I do take the wider point of what she is saying. Maybe education in school doesn't fit everybody, does it?
Yeah.
I think we have to acknowledge that one size fits all does not work any longer.
Yeah.
It isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, part of the absence figures, we discussed it on ours. We're kind of, genuine students that, are so anxious about schools, and they've got kind of real needs that currently, for whatever reason, in their school or in their local community aren't being met. So it's felt like they've had to be almost like withdrawn from school to kind of get that right. But there's obviously the other side of absenteeism, which is the kind of the early breakaway, bank holiday, the early kind of summer break. And there's some alarming statistics around the kind of that last week of July. Something like 5% of the whole the school population was essentially recorded absence. Now that presumably that can only be related to holidays, because there was no kind of something that spread through schools during that time that would mean that so many people across the country would need to be off.
Honestly, I think sometimes we do it to ourselves. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm old school. I have sometimes had a Barney or two with some of my colleagues saying, when do we put the videos on? Because I ain't putting videos on the last week of term. I'm teaching my subject right up to the end. Call me Killjoy. Call me that. But if you cheapen your education and you say, the last week of term, we don't do anything anyway, you're sending the wrong signal. You're really saying, the last week doesn't matter. So, but we're going to fine you for going off on a holiday. Do you see the kind of contradiction there? If we don't up our game in schools and actually say every lesson matters, it's got to matter. And if every lesson doesn't matter, and one of the problems we have in school now is it's not every lesson matters, because there are far too many supply teachers, far too many non-specialists, and far too many lessons where the behavior is not good enough. And parents are saying, well, they're not doing much at school, might as well do something better. And I understand that argument from some parents of taking their children out to go on holidays, because I've just taken children away 2 weeks out of school time to go to Borneo. Life-changing experience. Absolutely. So I agree sometimes on a case-by-case basis. But it is the thing that really grinds me is somebody whose child attendance is 85% to take them out on a holiday and then make that argument. I don't think you've got a leg to stand on. If your child's at 97, 98% attendance and you're doing that, I think you can understand. But there is a problem, I think, of value in education. There is a devaluing of education and a devaluing of teaching. And unfortunately, I think Ofsted have played into that, because this whole thing about running schools down to the ground, the government haven't supported us. I think there's just a general, the death by 1,000 cuts, what's happened in education, has devalued school. The lack of money in schools. We only spend about 3.9% of our GDP on schools and education. Even in the last general election, where was education? Where was education when it came to the priorities? Where was it when in the voting priorities? The two political parties hardly talked about it. And that's the problem and I think it has to be, if we are going to rescue this back, it has to be the mentality that I had growing up in the working class area, that education was vital to my existence. And I don't see that happening any longer. I don't see a lot of the children sitting in front of me value education in a way that could change their life. I don't think they're bothered. I don't think that some of their parents are bothered. I just genuinely think they're not bothered.
Yeah, just that there then. Do you think that the fine isn't kind of threatening enough?
No.
It's not. So the current situation is that it's your local council can give each parent a fine of £80, rising to 160 if they don't pay within 21 days. From 24-25 school year, each parent will get up to 2 fines. Will only get 2 fines for the same child in a 3-year period. So, I mean, you can just bake that into the cost of your holiday, can't you, really?
They do. And I was on an online forum watching the debate between a set of parents saying who's received a fine for their children be taken on a holiday. And I followed 150 odd comments of calculate, and there's parents doing the calculations right there and then go, went to Florida, calculated this, went to Center Parks in February after half term, but not during the half term, saved X amount of money, got the fine, and the fine worked out. Just take the fine, even though they're increasing the fine. There's a lot of parents just simply say, fine me, I don't care. I'm taking my child out. I'm doing what I want. And fair play to them. They want to go and do what they want. They're sovereign, aren't they? Because the last generation, they've been told they're sovereign. Because that's what's happening in education. We're a service now. And if we aren't providing them with a service they want, we get it. We get the pressure put on and we get threatened, or somebody going to ring up Ofsted or complain to the local press. And, and the child wants to wear whatever trainers they want. We push back. Well, we can't have that. I'm sick and tired of these schools telling me what to do. I'm sick and tired of them telling my child what to do. I'm going to tell them, I'm going to be honest with you, this is symptomatic of what really is going on in the wider society of, I get what I want. If I don't get what I want, I'm going to do what I want. School ain't telling me what to do. And there's just a class of people out there just basically saying that to their children. They're sending that signal to their children. However, the other side of that is us, where we're saying, sorry about that lesson your children being taught, it's not taught by a specialist. So it's very hard to rescue the argument and very hard to say how important education is when we've been chronically underfunded, we're understaffed, and we've got buildings which are frankly crumbling around us. So something has to change, isn't it? The whole culture around education in this country has to change, because quite simply it's not working. It's quite simply parents are buying out of it and saying, I'm not sending my child to that school. The school's not good enough. And some are homeschooling because they rightly think that their children could be homeschooled better by them. And I think, I'll be honest, judging from societal shifts, there is a definite correlation between the number of parents working from home now and the number, I think, parents who I even know, I know a group of parents who club together and they network together and they homeschool a couple of children. And they are professionals, they work from home and they do it on a rota. And I can say that they're educating their children quite well because they weren't happy with the education provision within the area. Who am I to criticize them for that? Judging from what's happening with education in the country, some parents are acting for what they think is the best interest of their children, especially some of the children with neurodiversity. JBL, this wouldn't work well. We have secondary school teachers cope with 2-tier education. If teacher can't see students in the class, how would they cope with 15 at home? Absolutely correct. Even when one child is missing a lesson or two and they're out of sequence, getting caught up is difficult for some children, isn't it? But you can't do sequence learning. Your whole schemes of work would be out the window, wouldn't it? And your scaffolding, you'd fundamentally be difficult to teach in that way, because we teach in a linear way, don't we? We scaffold, we build up our schemes of work, and when you don't have that, that's what happens. And when children miss, I think our analysis showed if children miss 5% of year 11 after 95%, which is the average, they lose half a grade for every 5%. And that's just because they're not covering the content. And they're not covering the content. They can't answer the questions. It's no rocket science on that.
I think we're going to leave it there tonight, Brent. But thank you very much for your contributions. We just a very, very quick one, because I need to. If I could just say hello to our sponsors first, then Brent can tell us what's happening at the weekend. It's a big weekend for him and fellow teacher, TTR Radio history teachers. So we'd just like to say a thank you to Future and Careers, providing a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. They help teachers to show their students what they can aim for and how. Articles, free articles, activity sheets, animations, podcasts, resources aligned with Gatsby benchmarks and are free to download. So as you can see there, scrolling across the bottom, you can visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. And as always, thank you to John Catt, John Catt Educational Publishing, professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools all around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com and use the code JCTTR2425 to get 20% off your order. You can see that coming across at the bottom. So very quickly, Brent, because it's dead on an hour, what's happening this weekend?
Not this weekend, it's weekend after. So it's Teachers Talk History in Manchester, and you can see the diversity of talks and speakers there, which will be speaking, and I'll be speaking on Middle Eastern education in Key Stage 4. We can see disciplinary literacy, stories in abolition, such a diverse bunch of individuals all speaking, and it's free, obviously, at Eventbrite. So you get yourself signed up to that if you fancy speaking to like-minded individuals like me. There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We've just popped over the hour. Sorry for that. If you want to apply to be a host, please scan the code there. We're always looking to get like-minded teachers that can have a thoroughly good chat like we had with Dr. Tom Bennison tonight. So thank you very much for him. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much and have a good week. And again, as always, look after yourselves. It's only early. Remember, it's a marathon, not a 100-meter sprint. You've got to get a long way to go. So look after yourself over the next couple of weeks. All the best. Good night.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused